Broadcasting from the crypt. Welcome to Velvet Bite Radio.
You've entered Velvet Bite Radio, my friends, where the undead speak and the forgotten bite back. I'm your host, Melissa Dawn Harris, writer, researcher, and devoted wanderer through vampire folklore, history, and film. Each week, we descend into the crypt of culture to uncover the myths, monsters, and meaning behind the vampire's eternal allure. So pour a glass, dim the lights, and let's begin. Welcome to Velvet Bite Radio, friends. I'm your host, Melissa, and today we are digging deep into the archive with a show I did back in 2024 with author Dan Klefstad. He is the author of the book Fiona's Guardian, a modern-day vampire tale. I'm not going to go into the whole thing because we talk about it, of course, in the interview. But Dan is an amazing author. He was a radio broadcaster for many, many years. He also runs a podcast called Vamp Chat, which I encourage you to check out. He is living his life out with vampire fiction and in the wonderful state of Kentucky. So we had a great talk about vampires, and I will definitely try to get Dan back on the show, Velvet Bite Radio, in the future. But I hope you enjoy the show. And before I sign off, to let you into this wonderful interview, please visit melissadawnharris.com for all of the links. Please subscribe on the YouTube. Give the podcast 5 stars if you're listening to it on iTunes or Spotify. And remember to follow us and leave a comment. Get in the discussion. Let us know what you think about vampires or when you first became aware of vampires and became obsessed with them. All right. So I hope you enjoy this interview. We will see you next time on the Velvet Bite Radio. Let's get into that interview with the very gothic author, Dan Klefstad. Tonight, of course, we are talking about vampires. I have a very special guest, author Dan Klefstad, and he is here to talk about his book, Fiona's Guardian. It's a novel that he wrote a few years ago, and it's got a very mysterious female vampire character as the central figure. And so we're going to bring him on in just a moment to discuss everything vampire and his novel and the unique character that he's created, and of course where you can get this book. So let's go ahead and bring Dan in. I'm not going to make you guys wait any longer. Welcome to the show, Dan.
Hello, Melissa. It's nice to see you.
Yeah, how have you been doing in Authorland?
Authorland is a good place for me right now. I've actually made some progress on the sequel to Fiona's Guardians, and I hope to get that to my publisher probably sometime this summer, later this summer.
That was actually going to be one of my questions, is if there was a sequel. So now we've eliminated that one right out of the gate.
All right.
That's good. Okay.
So efficient we are.
I know you wanted to read an excerpt of Fiona's. Do you want to do that now, or would you rather do like an introduction of yourself, or it's up to you?
I could do I could give you the 30-second version of myself, and then if you want, I could read the excerpt. I used to live, I worked in radio for 30 years, recently retired, moved from DeKalb, Illinois to Louisville, Kentucky, which I absolutely love. I've been here for about a year, and I found it a great place to interact with other writers. I found lots of booksellers out here that I've been working with, and I just got invited to present, to help my fellow authors promote themselves. I'll be leading a presentation on DIY book promo at the Imaginarium convention, which is July 19th to 21 in Louisville.
I have a friend who lives in Ashland, Kentucky, a really good friend, and it looks like a great place. I've never been to Kentucky. Maybe one day me and my husband will drive over there, but she seems to love it there.
I love it too. So a lot of natural beauty. Of course, you've got bourbon. We're the bourbon capital of the world here, and of course, if you're into the horses, we have a lot of them
Kentucky
too.
Derby.
Yes, right.
Yeah. That's excellent. Okay, so can we hear an excerpt from Fiona's Guardian?
Yeah, and I think it's great to have it at the beginning of this show because this is basically an introduction to the book. Most of Fiona's Guardians is told from the point of view of the humans who work for Fiona, who supply her blood. But Fiona does address the reader directly a handful of times, including right at the beginning of the book. Hello, mortal. I'm touched by your interest in those who work for me and those who used to. A handful truly deserve to be remembered in a book that never goes out of print. Their loyalty and talent are the reason I've existed for 2.5 centuries. A few, however, earned the painful and premature deaths detailed in these pages. For me, loyalty comes first and must be constant. That's not to say a partnership with me can't end in mutual agreement. It just never happened before. Still, I may allow my current guardian to retire. After serving longer than any other, he might well live his remaining years in a manner of his choosing. This would create an opportunity for another to earn his substantial salary and benefits. But a warning is in order. The work is as relentless and unsparing as my hunger, and everyone I employed has murdered at least once on my behalf. Not that this is the preferred option. There are other, less extreme ways to obtain blood for me, and Daniel built a robust network that can be handed off to a successor. He's in the car now, looking at his watch, wondering when we can go home to his decanter of scotch. From what I see, nothing in your cabinet would satisfy him, so rest assured I won't leave with any of your bottles. I see you've been reading job postings. Do not ask if I offer a retirement plan. In truth, I've never understood the concept. Each evening I awake knowing I'm the chief executive for extending my life, so ceasing work would amount to suicide. But this is what Daniel wants, and I owe him for that time he saved me from dying. It's in the book. My favorite chapters feature Agrippina, the one who created me. Driven by hunger, she brought me to the edge of death, but changed her mind when I started turning blue. She claimed she saw something worth preserving, a simple, unselfish nature that disappeared when she opened a vein for me. Since that moment, the only feeling I've known, besides adoration for her, is a craving that never ceases. That is, until the instant I tasted regret, the perpetual pain of guilt at not being with her when our enemies reappeared. They're in here too, and so is my revenge. Go ahead, indulge your curiosity. When you finish reading, I'll visit again and make myself visible. You'll find me sitting in that chair over there, and we can talk about your future. Until then.
Wow, is that sort of like she's scoping out some potentials?
She's hiring.
It's like a job interview. You guys could go be so the Guardian. We'll start. So I want to get, but the Guardian is the people that she gets basically to protect her.
Yes, she has since the early 20th century. She started hiring people to, at first, subdue a victim for her, bring the victim to her, and then bring the victim away to be buried when she was done with them. And then in the 1920s, when blood donation became a thing, she got the idea to have people work for her in hospitals who steal a little bit of blood, donated blood enough, and then sell it to her or her designated guardian, and then that's how she survives. Because Fiona is more savvy than most of her, the rest of her vampire family. She would rather not have murder police coming to her door when she's most vulnerable during the day when she's asleep. So that's why she hires people to procure blood for her.
And then if anything gets fishy, they can take the rap.
Exactly. So there's a and they go into the job understanding this. And the job, it's 10 figures, according to another chapter in the book we read.
Wow.
Yeah, it's a huge salary, and you're on all the time. When Fiona is up, you are working for her. When she's asleep, you're investing her money. You're trying to make sure you're just taking care of the house. You're doing whatever she needs done. And yeah, and Daniel, her current guardian, has built up this massive group of people in hospitals all over the country who steal a little bit of O negative because that's her preferred. It's an aesthetic thing. It's just she just prefers O negative. So they steal it, the bags of O negative for her, sell it to Daniel. Daniel brings it back to Fiona.
So I want to ask, where for you personally did the fascination or the idea come to write for vampires? Is this recent or is this like a long held interest you've had?
I've always been interested in vampires ever since I was a kid, watching, Bela Lugosi in Dracula, or even some of the follow-up films that were less good, or Christopher Lee as Dracula. Or I just had a fascination with the vampires because they work on different levels. If you take vampires just as mythical creatures, they're always portrayed as stronger than we humans are, sexier
Mhm.
than we are, and they just go on living unless something catastrophic happens, like a stake through the heart or exposure to the sun. But as I got older and more sophisticated, I realized that vampires were wonderful metaphors for the things that drain
Mhm.
our energy. The vampire could be your neighbor or a family member or coworker. It could be a corporate or government entity that's stealing your money, prompting you to ask, "Why do I feel poor this month?" So at the end of the book, Fiona's Guardians, I hope that readers will ask themselves, "Who's my vampire?"
Who am I the guardian for?
Yeah, yeah,
Right?
yeah.
Well,
Mhm.
like for instance, you mentioned Dracula. Bram Stoker based a lot of the characteristics of Dracula on Henry Irving, who was his boss. And he was a really narcissistic, rather arrogant actor.
Mhm.
So that's who he was kind of the guardian of, even though he gives it the name historically of the Vlad the Impaler kind of Dracula figure. He actually based it on a real person he knew. So it's interesting that you point that out. Who are the
So yeah,
vampires in our lives?
yeah, absolutely, and I love what Stoker did, creating this character based on somebody where he worked with at was it the Lyceum Theater in
Hmm.
yeah, yeah. So fascinating, and that just gets back to the long history we have of vampire literature. I mean, Stoker wasn't even the first to write about vampires in English. It was, I believe, it was John Polidori's short story or novelette called "The Vampire" from 1819, in which
Hmm.
his vampire Lord Ruthven was based on Lord Byron.
Another highly narcissistic guy.
Yes, yeah,
Well, did you see recently there was a movie out called Renfield? And
I
they
did see it.
totally went with the narcissistic personality disorder and the codependent, the Renfield syndrome thing. I was like, that was funny.
It was, and of course, you get that the master-slave relationship like that. Mine is slightly different, of course, because I have an alpha female vampire, and it
Right.
is an employee-employer relationship, but it's also something much more. Um, the two spend time getting to know each other. They become friends, or at least they need each other to survive. And so that's the
Right.
relationship here. And I would argue that Renfield had it easy compared to what the Fiona's
Yeah.
vampires, or Fiona's humans
Interesting.
rather. Yeah.
So why did you choose a female vampire? because a lot of the male vampires have been considered male, and I'm going to ask you, what was it about a female sort of alpha?
Off the top, most people probably know of a couple of what I would call alpha female vampires, and I'm not going to include Carmilla in this regard because I think she's more of she starts off as someone who's sickly, needy, and then grows as she's taken into her victim's homes. I found that there were not many alpha females, and the only one that I could think of right away is Akasha, the vampire, the 8,000-year-old vampire in Queen of the Damned, Anne Rice's
Anne
novel.
Rice.
Right. Akasha played memorably by Aaliyah, the singer, who in the 2000 film. Yeah.
Yeah, it's a great film. No, there's not. I mean, there was a lot of female, like there was that movie, The Hunger.
Mhm,
I don't
mhm.
know. It's the same thing. That's a weird female vampire figure.
She's Miriam Blaylock is the character that Catherine Deneuve plays in that movie, The Hunger, and she plays it kind of. I guess she underplays it. That's what makes that character so. She's much more mysterious, much more French, I guess you could say.
Yeah.
Yeah, and whereas I think Fiona has a much wider range of emotion. She does lead from behind in many cases, but then when things go wrong or she has to step forward, she does, and you know, stuff happens if she gets upset, and she does. I don't consider this a spoiler. She will murder people in this book.
Right. Now, is there any figures in history that inspired the character, like real people in history? Like, are you a history buff and you kind of collected people from history that inspired Fiona?
I suppose people will want to know if what Elizabeth Bathory, the Hungarian countess, has to do with because she's an early figure charged with accused of vampirism, right? Bathing in the blood of virgins so that she can look beautiful as she ages. I would hesitate. I would probably say that that's not an ancestor, if you will, to Fiona. I think I sort of just came up with her in a dream, and the character Fiona and this sort of dream of her came out of the question: what would it be like to work for a vampire? And what would it be like to live with a vampire and talk with a vampire and sort of interact every day with one? And for me, Dracula and Renfield just wasn't answering that question because Renfield only works for Dracula for a little while.
Right.
Yeah. So I wanted to, this would be a decades-long relationship of these two, sharing intimate
Right.
moments, thoughts, whatever. And what would that be like? And that prompted the book. Actually, it prompted the short story that led to the novel. Fiona and
Right.
Daniel. I introduced Fiona and Daniel to the world in 2017 in a short story called The Caretaker, which was published by the journal Crack the Spine. And that's where these two characters emerged. And then book bloggers who reviewed the short story said they wanted more. And that prompted me to write more short stories, which became chapters in the book. And so eventually had stitched them together to get a 300-page novel.
Interesting. Now, does she have is there an ultimate goal that Fiona has, or is she just sort of going about life dealing with the fact that she too is now a vampire and just living day to day with her, survival skills?
You're right. So she, near the beginning of the book, one of the earlier chapters, she tells someone who wants to be a guardian, she was interviewing for the job. She says, "I'm in the business of surviving." And most of this book is about her just trying to survive, extend her life. However, when the vampire hunters who destroy Fiona's sire, Agrippina, the group is called Mors Strige. They're a Vatican SWAT team, hit squad, whatever you want to call
The
it.
Vatican.
Yes,
We talk about them on our conspiracy theory night all the time.
Oh, good. All right, this is going to be a fun discussion. So I have a centuries-old organization, and to this day, they are Mors Striga remains the only lethal organization within the Catholic Church. They're a secret organization, and only they're run by one cardinal who knows their identity, and they have fought battles with Fiona and her family in the past, and now they're back with new technology. They have drones with thermal imagers that can register the vampires who are 28 degrees Fahrenheit, and then the guys can the monks can break into their home and drag them outside, burn them into the sun or whatever. And once this Mors Strigae group announces their reappearance, their emergence, and kill Fiona's sire, Agrippina, then Fiona has a different kind of goal. She wants to destroy Mors Striga, and in the end, she becomes a powerful hidden figure in Rome. So the real power behind the Catholic Church.
Okay. Interesting, because, you know, we always see vampires as this evil and the church is doing good. Do you like, because sometimes I look at vampirism, I think, it's kind of a curse. Did you get that? Do you have that in your book, that it's kind of a curse?
It is a curse. And this is what this is the hand they've been dealt. I'm a vampire now. What do I do with that? And so, yes, I make them. I make it so that it is hard to know who's, it's not all black and white. Both the vampire family and their guardians have aspects about them that are moral, maybe, and certainly we would consider perhaps immoral. But so do the people who run Mors Striga, the cardinal at the top, and then the group Mors Striga. They have a sort of a military hierarchy, and anytime you have a corporation or a hierarchy like that, it's very hard to have a clean conscience when you go home at the end of the day.
Yeah. Well, I mean, there's a lot of people who are good Christians, but that's totally different from the people who are running the Vatican and the power struggles. I mean, I'm sure the Borgia family weren't very nice, even though you had a lot of pious Christians in those days. So
yeah, it's all
being
about
spiritual and power, those are two different things. And so, I always liked, like, what's his name? Peter Cushing's character, because he seemed like this really good character who really meant well. But in our day and age, we know that these power figures are corrupt, probably, and they're just as bad as vampires.
Yeah, I mean, you don't get to positions of power without walking over others. I think that most of us would agree. So, absolutely.
So, in saying that, is Fiona kind of like a female psychopath?
I would definitely not say a psychopath. She is. What is she? She has goals. She has an understanding of what it needs for her to survive and to create the conditions for her to have a safe, long life. In the end, is that moral or not? She's just doing what she's built to do, really.
Right.
To be a vampire. It's like asking a great white shark or a tiger, a Bengal tiger, are we feeling moral today? They're primarily interested in, first of all, eating, then mating, and then eating some more and sleeping. I think I would say Fiona's a little more complex. Fiona is.
So it's basically just instinctual survival, like you said originally. She's not really trying to be like a super villain, like Lex Luthor or something.
Well, she's smart. She's savvy. She can plan. She can think ahead and say, okay, I have a plan to get out of this, or I have a plan to build upon our successes. So she is. There's like a sort of this battle and I love that when you brought this up about the instincts, because when she's working with humans or having humans do her work, she's actually, the vampires in my book and in my universe become a little more civilized. They're managers. But when they are, for whatever reason, not working with humans, they do not have humans supporting them or interacting with them in a sort of constructive way, they do kind of they lean back to instinct. And almost, you could say, they regress a bit,
Mhm.
you know, and that's certainly the case with Fiona.
Well, that's interesting. Now, do you find that you have a varied audience, or like what kind of people are attracted to this female character? Like, do you get a lot of women?
I do, but also men. I think that it's a pretty wide readership. I would say this book is definitely not for kids, but most of the people who I interact with about the book tend to be, well, Gen Xers or Boomers. I
Interesting.
think, yeah, because some of the themes are, Daniel, the vampire guardian, the guardian of Fiona. He's at a stage in his life where he wants to retire. I think that that might be a bit of a. I wonder how. I don't know the answer to this, but I wonder how a millennial or a Gen Z person would connect with a book about a guy, who works for a vampire who's thinking about retiring.
Right, getting out of the business.
Hmm.
That's not an
Yeah.
easy one. I don't, my son is Gen Z, and I haven't ever. I mean, I was into vampires when I was younger, and I'm a younger Gen X, but I've never heard anything. It's just video games. So maybe the video gaming kind of, I don't know, players are gonna be. You'll have like some kind of vampire video game players that would be into something like that.
And if there are any video game designers who are listening to this podcast, this live stream, and you would be interested in a conversation about turning Fiona into I guess, sort of an
Mhm.
action video, I'm all ears. I'd love to have that conversation.
Yeah, and now do you have, like, an array of different vampire characters that besides Fiona that appear? Yeah.
Yes, in the book, they all share a bloodline that goes back 2,000 years. The oldest vampire in their family is sort of Roman, like he looks like a Roman emperor. Caius Drusus is his name, and he sired. I could give you all the begats like in,
Yeah,
in
yeah, yeah.
Genesis, but I could spare you that. I think Fiona is his great grand great granddaughter, if you will, and they will sometimes refer to each other. Oh, okay, so you're the brother of the one who created me, so you're my uncle. They'll kind of sometimes use those terms like uncle or grandfather or mother or whatever. But they're all, because they share that bloodline. That's the family.
Yeah, that's interesting because, it does remind me a little bit of Anne Rice because she goes back, like, when
Mhm.
where Bram Stoker, I mean, there's history there, but he never really goes back, probably because it's a different time, and his book wasn't immediately successful in the way that, I mean, it's long-standing, but it was kinda considered like a Penny Dreadful kind of book at the time. I don't think it was highly successful right away, so
You're right.
maybe had it been, he might have delved into it, but he kinda died penniless, or not penniless, but not rich,
That's
and
right.
it
Yeah.
was his wife who benefited mostly from the royalties in future, and the fact that it was turned into at the time, I guess we're talking video games, at their time, it would have been a stage play
Right.
or a film.
Absolutely. Yeah, I think there were two adaptations, stage adaptations, and then, of course, we had the copyright violation, the 1922 German film Nosferatu, the silent film with the bald vampire. Remember that one?
Mhm.
That one was a copyright violation. Stoker's widow sued, and all copies were destroyed, except obviously a couple that they were able to save.
Yeah.
Um, but yes, then the 1931 Bela Lugosi film for Universal Films. So at that point, that's when the estate, if you will, started making some money. It took the adaptations, several, for that to happen.
That's interesting because I heard originally, like, he tried to put on a stage adaptation, and it was not very good.
Right. So he wrote the first stage adaptation, and
Mhm.
just to have his name on it and whatever. Um, and I guess that leads to or reminds me of what I hope for my novel. I do hope that we are able to. My dream for Fiona's Guardians and the sequel is a streaming series. Something on Hulu, or Netflix or
Yeah.
whatever. But the book has been adapted once already by the all professional acting company Artists Ensemble Theater, and that they did a podcast, sort of a theater of the mind podcast of Fiona's Guardians, which you can find on their Mysterious Journey podcast, and it's an excellent production. It's got 7 union actors and interstitial music and sound effects, and the playwright who adapted my book took 4 chapters and she did a fabulous job. I was really impressed with the job that playwright Margaret Rather did in adapting my book. It's available everywhere: Spotify, Podbean, wherever you get your podcasts.
And anyone if you're watching, you'll see I just brought it up. But if you're listening on the other podcast in future, please check out Dan's website at www.danklefstad.com. I've got it right here up on the screen, and I'm sure everything's there for Dan and his book. And so that's interesting, the play, because when you look at like Dracula and how the was it Hamilton Dean play, so different. Did you find that there was a lot of like it made it almost a different story, or were they pretty close to your book?
Well, what they did was they took the dialogue, and I made it easier for them because my book is heavily dependent on dialogue. I have narration, but most of the scenes involve back and forth, 2 people talking often rapidly at each other. So I think I made it easy for the playwright to adapt it, just because, as you know, a stage play is heavily dependent on dialogue. That's how you can't have any exposition at all. Everything has to be, we have to explain verbally what we're doing and what's happening around us. And so, I think that Margaret did a fantastic job of adapting it. She had to change the ending of the podcast to make it a complete arc.
Right.
There's something that happens in the book that's a little bit different, quite a bit different. But I approved it anyway because I thought it made sense for the adaptation.
Right. Because because it has to be a complete project, because obviously there wasn't a sequel at the time or anything like that. Right. Now, does Fiona only have male guardians? Or does she switch around? Because it seemed Daniel's a man, and I thought, is she like a misandrist? Is she like getting revenge on men? Is there an element there where she wants to enslave men?
Maybe at first for her, but she has had female guardians, and the one immediately before Daniel, we actually go back into the mid 1980s in this toward the beginning of the book. Daniel sort of explains how he got here, and there was a guardian named Tanya who was Fiona felt the need to get away from. There was something not right there, and she uses Daniel to kind of dispatch, if you will, Tanya, and that's how Daniel becomes bonded to Fiona.
So she's an opportunity. Oh, that's my dog.
Hey.
Equal. Maybe he's seen a vampire. He's my
really
protective hound.
Is Fiona prowling around your studio?
I don't know. Go get her, Petey. But well, no, it's interesting because I thought she is an equal opportunist, because I thought, is this because she's this alpha female? I thought, well, maybe she has a history with men when she was immortal or something like that, where she's like, okay, now I'm gonna get you, making the personal more projected out on everyone else. So
well, there is a hook. There is a connection to what you're saying. Fiona is an opportunist, and she will do whatever she can to bind someone to her if she needs them, and she's identified that need. And so she initially, I think, chooses men, or has chosen men, because she is beautiful, alluring, and her sexuality, her magnetism, is power over men, certainly, or at least heterosexual men. And however, she's also been able to do this with women who may be bi or gay. So that's kind of it. She is this
interesting.
She's not holding out any hope that a romantic relationship will occur, but she does she presents herself as a beautiful, alluring, sexual being, and that is attractive. One of the, beyond the money, there is an attraction to the Guardians who work for.
Interesting. Now, when you were writing this, like I know, like authors like Bram Stoker probably had specific ideas in mind when he was writing his characters about societal problems, and
Mhm.
then we probably project our own stuff onto it because, like you said, it's a metaphor. Did you have any societal problems in mind when you were writing that you wanted to deal with through the character of Fiona and the story?
I have had people who've read the book say, "Is this about capitalism, or is this about unequal power dynamics between the sexes, or whatever, uh, or is this about the Catholic Church, or something like that?" And it really wasn't. I didn't walk into this manuscript with an agenda, and I'm glad I didn't. I actually would tell writers not to do that,
Right.
because if you create a story from a certain template, a perspective
Hmm.
that is, this fits.
Like an
Uh,
ideology.
yes, exactly. This fits a Marxist sort of ideology, or this is a
Yeah.
climate or whatever. It limits not only your audience, but it limits all these things are going to change. Politics
Yeah.
change,
Yeah.
civilizations change, and if you
Yeah.
want your story to last and carry through the ages, then it's a good idea to just tell your story, or a story that
Yeah.
appeals to you. You know.
And usually broader audiences respond to classical archetypes anyways. They don't really, if you're gonna be like hammering right in their head with anything political, you're gonna be pretty divisive in your audience. And
Yeah.
so, yeah, you want your audience to see themselves in the characters too, regardless of what their background is.
And there you're talking about empathy, aren't you? Yeah, that's if you have any kind of empathy, I want you to think of as you're reading my book. Oh my God, that's terrible! What happened to this guy who I previously thought was a villain, or this
Hmm.
vampire who I really hated? But at this death, I now miss them. And if you the reader, miss one of the characters that eventually die, that I killed off or whatever, then I feel like I've done my job.
Yeah, and it kind of reminds me like of the TV series Dark Shadows when they
I
first bring on
remember.
Barnabas Collins and he's the villain, but he actually turns into the kind of hero anti-hero and like to kill him off, like the audience would just go crazy, but he actually started out as your stereotypical villain. And the audience response to him was so intense that he transformed into the main character. I found that really fascinating how that happened.
And Jonathan Frid, that's his name.
Yeah. Yeah.
Oh, Canadian actor. Yeah, yeah.
Hmm.
He was. It takes a skilled actor like him to be able to pull that off.
Hmm.
Absolutely, and he did a fantastic job.
Yeah, it's very Shakespearean on
Mhm.
TV, actually. It's
Yeah.
like it's like Shakespeare, creepy, weird vampire. And what I always like about it, I'll watch it. We were supposed to have a show on it, but my guests we can't sort the technology issues out. I kind of like it because it's its own world, and like you said, there's no politics, there's no ideology projected onto it. It's classical archetype, and it's like when you go to Dark Shadows,
Mhm.
it's Dark Shadows. Everything in the real world doesn't apply, and you can kind of
Yeah.
be in your own little world for a little while with
Yeah.
the
And
Collins
this class.
family.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And you mentioned classical archetypes. That works really well when you're laying on Gothic atmosphere, which the creators of Dark Shadows really did well. I thought they
Hmm.
provided you this great sort of atmosphere, and if you're into that sort of uh, aesthetic, the Gothic aesthetic,
Hmm.
then you're going to be hooked, whether or not whatever happens in that show. I think
Yeah, exactly. Now, in your vampires are they're more modern. It's not
they
really
are.
a classical literature sort of idea?
That's right. But we do go back in time. So we're in the 1980s at some point, and then the 90s. We go all the way back to the 1920s and earlier, and then we even walked through World War II at one point on the
Wow.
Eastern Front. Yeah, yeah. So and and I think that portraying vampires, the same vampire character in different settings, does lend them to be perceived as a classical archetype, I think, because they're the constant
Well,
as history
I
changes.
I
You know?
think Yeah, there's no reason, like, you have to have some sort of archetype there. You can wrap it in modern clothing or
Yes, you can.
modern sensibilities, but it's still, you'll still have a wise man or a villain or the female. And one of my, like, the female villain would be like a devouring sort of mother type of figure. You have all those throughout all of literature, and you don't have to necessarily have a historical Gothic Shakespearean play in style to do it. You could do it with a modern movie, and they do. Star Wars is a good example.
Yeah, there's a modern
Original Star Wars, original,
right, and
OG.
now that's become an archetype, really.
Yeah,
So I guess
yeah,
if there are any writers here who are thinking about world building and thinking about creating their own the stories, um, yeah, you can draw on past archetypes, but don't be afraid to dive in and create your own. It's
yeah.
that's a worthy
And
goal.
I still think, like, even if you create your own, you're still drawing from, I guess I'm getting a little woo woo here, but you're kind of drawing from like a collective conscious of archetypes. That energy's still there all throughout history, whether
Yeah.
it's female, male, whatever. Like, if you have a female villain, you can make her more modern and sexy, but she can still be a devouring female, especially if
Yes.
she's a vampire. She could, I mean, I don't know. Would you describe her relationship with Daniel as sort of codependent? Because, like, you kind of have to infantilize the person to keep them there. They
Right.
can't ever be free, can they?
Right. There's a question of even though she's thinking about letting Daniel go and hiring a new guardian named Wolf, will she really let Daniel go? Um, and yes, they what they have is a very tight symbiotic relationship. They absolutely depend on
Mhm.
it. Fiona depends on Daniel and the other guardians for protection during times when she's vulnerable, and they keep her world stable. She has a steady food supply. She doesn't have to
Mhm.
kill anybody, create attention, that kind of thing. But the people who work for her, I guess, crave some sort of attention from her or acknowledgement. But also, they need her protection because they're now doing dangerous work. And
Yeah.
if the police find them, or if they're Fiona's enemies, the vampire hunters of Morstriga, for example, hunt them down. They need Fiona's protection as well.
Right. Well, that's really interesting. That's an interesting way to play it out with the. It's symbiotic, but it's kind of symbiotic in a really, I don't know, not the way I would prefer symbiogy.
So, right, is it a healthy relationship?
Yeah, I'm
Is it
like,
healthy?
it's a little toxic.
Yeah, yeah, it's a bit toxic, sure, and in the end, it is. She's the boss. She's in charge. She's the alpha. So it is really serving. We're serving her needs. Her needs in the end come first, but she does need them as well, and so she tries to, look out for them as well.
Right. Because, well, I guess it must be hard to get a guardian that fits the criteria. I suppose that it's not exactly, even though there's billions of people, it probably has to fit a certain criteria that might not be as easy to get. You just don't
Yeah,
want anybody being your guardian.
it has to be somebody you trust, and the people you entrust to be your guardian. They don't get vacations. There are no vacations. Fiona doesn't get a day off. If she doesn't eat,
No.
or get blood, 10 pints a night, then she starts to decay. And I have this in the book where at one point she does begin to decay in front of one of her former guardians, and the smell of putrefaction, it's stuff, and her hair starts to
So
fall out. And,
it really is a curse.
it really is a curse in that regard. Yes.
Well, and that's the whole thing now, because I know you have the church kind of figures in there, but it is kind of a spiritual thing where, in my mind, like, I always saw vampires as they defy the natural order. So there's like a price to pay.
Yes. However, I'm going to go out on a limb and suggest maybe that humans are engaging in a bit of hubris when they say that they control the natural order too. So,
I don't think we do
yeah,
control the natural order.
right, yeah, and yet that's the motivation, right? We want to have a nice manicured lawn. We want to start up a company and have our own vision, or we're part of somebody else's hierarchy, whether it's corporate or military.
I'm thinking more of like we're going to space and we're going to have babies in pods and we're going to bypass the natural, and people are going to be storing themselves, and rich people are going to be storing themselves into AI so they can live forever. I'm like, you guys are freaking nuts.
Yeah. Welcome to the future.
It looks nihilistic. Okay, well, we'll kind of tie it up a little bit towards the end here. And I know you said you're gonna have a sequel. Where do you see the book going besides just a play? Do you have other developments in mind for the book?
Yes.
Across
So we
different
meet.
platforms?
So the sequel involves Fiona. She's very much a character, but not right away. We meet Fiona's daughter, if you will, someone she transforms, named Camilla. And Camilla is this wild, reckless, young vampire, and she's a danger to herself and everybody around her. And Fiona would like some stability there, so she can have a long life. And so Fiona allows Camilla to hire Daniel as a guardian. This is after Fiona, at the end of the book, has found a safe, powerful place for herself. And she doesn't need Daniel right away anymore, but she still needs Daniel to look after her progeny, if I can use that word. And so the next book will be largely about the relationship between Daniel and Camilla and how it goes haywire, and then full circle toward the end, something remarkable will happen between the two. So.
Wow. Okay, that's great. And so you were saying your ideal would be like a streaming series.
I would love, after I finish the sequel, it would be enough, I think, for two. I'm not a showrunner. I've never, I don't do TV. I know nothing about this, but it seems to me that would be worth 2 seasons right there of bingeable content. And that's my goal. That's my ultimate goal. I know that it could work. I believe it could work because I've gotten adapted once, by the all professional acting company. And if I can get adapted once, I'm pretty sure I can get adapted again. There is a short film adaptation in the works for Fiona's Guardians on the order of 15 minutes or so. I am learning how to write a screenplay for that, and I'm working with a director screenwriter, but it's slow, and nothing's going to happen anytime soon on that, I think.
And I know you do some pretty fantastic marketing. Like I see people all the time on your Facebook, like showing, you're posting their pictures of them with Fiona's Guardian. And do you have any, I don't know, tips to people who are writers and on how to get started, or, what to do if they want to write?
I mean, every year, 2 million Americans self-publish every year. I mean, it's an astonishing number of people. And they know they've spent money on getting an edit, hopefully. They've spent money on a good cover art, but they really don't know much about marketing. Most people don't know how to market themselves, most authors. And so they end up either. Well, that's it's something I had to teach myself largely, and I wrote a book about it. Just this year, in February, I published a book called DIY Book Promo: How to Find Readers Without Spending Money. And it's based largely on the campaign for Fiona's Guardians, where I teach how to co-brand with indie bookstores. Actually, the first thing I teach is which book reviewers to pursue for reviews and which to avoid. And then once you've got a good review from a respectable source, like a blogger or whatever, then you can pitch bookstores and work hard and I do work hard to co-brand with indie bookstores. I think indie authors and indie booksellers are natural allies, and we should both try harder on both sides. And I also borrow from my 30-year radio career, and teach how to pitch media outlets for interviews and how to perform well in front of the mic. I teach all of that in my book, DIY Book Promo.
Right, because I never really got into depth, but you did radio for quite a while.
Yeah, I was the morning host and newscaster at NPR station WNIJ in Northern Illinois. We covered Northern Illinois and Southern Wisconsin. So I was the morning guy for 25 years, and actually started 5 years before that in various other capacities, music host, news, that kind of thing. So yeah, 30 years of experience in radio has helped me promote my book because I learned some tools. And I learned, I took some courses on social media. My employer paid for, courses on how to use social media to your advantage. Of
Mm-hmm.
course, it's not just like how to take a photo, a proper photo that you can share, that kind of thing. Basic
Mm-hmm.
photography 101, and then, and up from there.
I know that I find it. I don't know if you found it because radio, there's no visual. I find it easier when there's no camera to actually think and talk. Like when I'm
Mhm.
running things all in this system and doing stuff, I'm like, I find it hard. Even if I have 50 questions written down, my mind's like, what was my question again? Because I'm focused on the visuals. So do you find it easier to sort of talk like old time radio? Like, because no one's watching you particularly? I find it
Yes.
easier when my camera's off to do this
Well,
podcast.
it's. I think it is easier because the visuals can be distracting, but I think for the audience member, radio or any audio medium like podcasts even, um, they allow you to multitask. You listen,
Mhm.
and it's a friend, it's a companion that's on there, and you kind of focus in, every now and then, do your thing here. Oh, that's interesting, whatever. So I think that audio mediums like radio have just long been understood to be a companion. And when you're a radio host, you learn how to be a companion, but you also learn promotion. Um, uh, One of the most important things to remember about radio is that you constantly have to keep people listening. And so the first words out of my mouth after saying, this is 89.5 WNIJ, where you learn something new every day. Good morning at 6:19. We'll have a high of 73 degrees today. Later this hour on WNIJ, we're going to have a story, a really sound, rich piece from the Amazon. You're not going to want to miss it. That story is at 6:45. And then I'll read some announcements or something like that. But
Mhm,
within the
mhm.
first few seconds of starting that break, I'm giving you a reason why you
You
should
should
be,
tune in later.
yeah, or stay tuned.
Tuning
Yeah,
in.
it's the next
Stay
10
tuned.
minutes. So, we're always trying to get you to the next quarter hour. And that got me
Wow.
thinking, and that trained my brain to think about promoting books. It's not an exact analogy, but it got me thinking. Always promote. And
Always
so
promote.
yes, and so what
I
you've
can
seen.
be really
Mhm.
awful at that. Like I'll push things so much but I'll be like, I'm an introvert and I just don't feel like talking today and I feel like hiding in my little dark
Yeah.
cave. I don't want to promote and I'll get like that or else I want to hire somebody like a guardian to go and
Mhm.
find guests for me because I'm like I just want to focus on the making the stuff. Somebody go get the people for me. I'm like, "Hey, wait, you can't afford that. You have to do it yourself."
A guardian for an introvert. I know there's a story there. There's this entire series
It's like, "I'm not
that
a
will do
vampire. I
that.
just don't wanna talk to people today."
Yeah, no, that's fantastic. I also address this in a chapter in my book, DIY book promo. If you're an introvert, you're still going to have to go on radio, go on podcasts, go on TV, because to keep your publisher happy, right? Or if you want
Yeah.
to sell any books at all. So I do offer some tips on how an introvert or someone who's just not really comfortable speaking in public can do well in an interview. And there are little tips that I give.
Perfect. Well, we're gonna finish this up. I have one more question for you to answer, and then we'll finish it off. What is the everlasting appeal of the vampire? Why do people for hundreds of years still love a good vampire story?
I think that they just evolve with the times. Bela Lugosi was essentially a late stage Victorian vampire, Dracula. And then we get Dracula in the 1970s with Frank Langella, who kind of was maybe the first actor to really portray Dracula as a sexy, creature. Yeah, and then we see that continue throughout. But it's and think about how different Christopher Lee Langella to Gary Oldman
That was
who I guess
my vampire, and it was a
yeah
teenager. Was Gary Oldman.
yeah that's
Yeah.
the Gen X Dracula right there,
Mhm.
Gary Oldman, and then the character now, I think I suspect that there may be a new generation who's going to create their own vampire, and it's not necessarily going to be a male. I don't know, male character. I'd like to think that there'd be another Fiona type character out there, sometime.
Absolutely.
So
And
yeah,
you know what? That's fantastic. All right. So, where can people find Fiona's Guardian? Where can they find the book?
you can find Fiona's Guardians in all the online places, Amazon, Barnes and Noble, Walmart.com. But if you have an independent bookstore in your neighborhood, uh, I strongly encourage you to order it from them. If they may have it on the shelves, but if they don't, they can get it to you in say 5 days. Yes, it's not 2 days or sooner if you're a Prime member, an Amazon Prime member. But is an extra 3 days going to kill you? You'd be supporting an independent business in your neighborhood, and more of your money will remain in the community. So I think the strength of our communities is built to a large extent on the mom and pop businesses that are pillars of the downtown.
And if anybody is out there listening and they have a small bookstore in their
Mhm.
community, do you want them to contact you with that so you can see if your
Oh,
book can be carried there?
absolutely. I want to know because there are new bookstores popping up all the time. Within an hour of my house here in Louisville, 3 opened up since last August. Within an hour of my house, and one of them is actually moving into a second location. Um, I forgot also to mention bookshop.org, which is I guess it's kind of a nonprofit. Many independent bookstores are members of bookshop.org. And when you shop, it allows you to shop online and name your favorite independent bookstore, and that bookstore will get the profits, which is kind of a cool tool. So you're able to shop online and yet support an independent bookstore in your former hometown that you miss, or maybe an hour away from your house.
Well, I want to thank you so much for joining the podcast tonight. And hopefully, if you have a second book, you'll come back on at a later date and push and
I,
promote that as well.
I would love to speak with you again, Melissa. I appreciate the opportunity.
Absolutely. All right. I'm just going to pop you out. You don't have to wait in the green room if you don't want to. And I'm going to close off the show, everybody. Thank you so much for coming.
Thank you.